Well, there could be trouble between Germany and the United States in the pipeline yet again. The U.S. House of Representatives on Tuesday approved a Pentagon budget bill that also expands sanctions against companies building the German-Russian Nord Stream 2 pipeline. Now, the bill passed with an overwhelming majority of both Democrats and Republicans, far exceeding the two-thirds supermajority that would be needed to override a presidential veto. The bill must now go to the U.S. Senate, where it is expected to easily pass. Well, U.S. opposition to the pipeline goes back to President Obama's second term. President Trump surprisingly agreed with this foreign policy position that he inherited from the Obama administration. Now, work on the pipeline stopped a year ago under pressure from the U.S., but it's due to restart any day now. Germany has rejected U.S. calls for a stop, just as it has rejected any notion of sanctions.
You
know what our position is on Nord Stream 2 and possible sanctions. We reject them because we do not consider extraterritorial sanctions to be compatible with international law. This has not changed.
Well, my next guest says that Russia is trying to sell Nord Stream 2 as a done deal, which it is not. I'm happy to welcome Benjamin Schmidt to the show. Benjamin served at the U.S. State Department as a European Energy Security Advisor. He's now a research fellow at Harvard University. Benjamin, it's good to have you back on the program. Before we talk about what's happening in Washington and in Congress, tell me what you mean about Russia trying to convince the world that there is no stopping of Nord Stream 2.
Hi, Brent. It's always a pleasure to be on Deutsche Welle. Great to be back. Well, let's start with the situation at hand right now today. I just wrote a piece for the Center for European Policy Analysis in Washington this morning. And I'm looking at this situation as Gazprom reprising its December 2019 disinfo playbook in order to make Nord Stream 2 look unstoppable with the intent of dissuading passage of these targeted congressional sanctions. After all, if the project can't be stopped, why even bother passing them? Well, that's not true. We've seen Gazprom and its allies over the past few weeks state in the media that the project is moving along apace. Its companies are fully committed in spite of sanctions. But just 24 hours after some of those headlines came out, the biggest certifier for the pipeline, DNV-GL, a major technical provider that would be needed for this project to be completed, left the project. And this was followed by an announcement last week that project construction would start in German waters on December 5th, last Saturday. But there's a little detail there. This is only 2.6 kilometers of the pipeline, and it's at a shallow depth that's not even targeted by the NDAA sanctions. So with all of that, Russian vessels, including Fortuna and Akademik Chersky, which have been reported on, have headed back to, at least in terms of the Chersky, to Kaliningrad in Russia.
So, Benjamin, are you saying then that that's all propaganda, that it's not true that construction is restarting?
Well, one of the biggest stories was that the Chersky, the Akademik Chersky, would be the main pipe layer, and that vessel never even made it to German waters. It sat in the Polish exclusive economic zone over the weekend. Well, a lot of media reported on this, and then it headed back to Russia just yesterday. Now, the Fortuna is making some motion this morning in the outside of the port of Wismar, Germany, but it hasn't really started this pipe laying that was supposed to start several days ago now.
And let me ask you about the U.S. opposition to this project. We know it dates back to the Obama administration. Then Vice President Joe Biden, he was vocal with his opposition. He is now about to become president. Congress stands with him. Do you think all of this monolith of opposition, is it going to be enough to ensure that this pipeline never goes online?
I think it is. I mean, I think this project, my colleague, Tom O'Donnell spoke on Euronews this weekend and said the project was dead. I think it's close to dead, to be honest, if these pass, and they look like they will. But, let's just step back for a second. Let's be thankful for the opportunity that the end of the Trump administration has provided to improve transatlantic ties, especially with Berlin. I have no doubt that the Biden team will be committed on this front. Both Biden and Congress have spoken out against Trump's spurious trade disputes and threats of pulling troops out of Germany in particular. But this is separate. This is about energy influence projection from authoritarian nations, we look at this from a transatlantic security standpoint, that Russia and China are using technology and large-scale critical infrastructure to do things like elite capture. We see Gerhard Schroeder working for this in Germany. We see a number of other nations working on, this sort of front. So we need to stop this strategic corruption.
Well, what role does the change at the White House play here? I mean, will it be easier or more difficult for German Chancellor Angela Merkel to tell a President Joe Biden no? I mean, she's not running for re-election next year, so she has nothing to lose here. And you and I have talked about this before. She has tried to separate Nord Stream to business from geopolitics.
Well, unfortunately, the Russians haven't separated their state-owned enterprise projects like Nord Stream from their own geopolitics. When you and I last talked, it was in the wake of the Navalny poisoning, and the position of Berlin, of the government, was to back off of this project should Russia not come through and actually help on that. Well, they certainly didn't. But yet we're having this conversation just a few weeks later. So I really think that it is possible that Merkel will make this sort of pitch, but I think there are bigger things that need to be fixed in the transatlantic relationship that will be easier, certainly under the Biden administration.
Yeah, and we've got about a minute 15. This pipeline, we know that it bypasses Ukraine. If you were to take Ukraine out of the equation here, European economies also are turning to renewable energies. If you put that together, this pipeline, it really doesn't seem to be that needed. It's not as threatening as it would have seemed 5 or even 10 years ago. Do you agree with that?
I think that it's not needed because it's not aimed at bringing new gas to Germany or points west. Only 9.9 billion cubic meters of that 55 billion cubic meter project are built to do that. So it's not about this Energiewende transition to renewables that some project supporters are trying to say. This is a massive hydrocarbon pipeline. It's something that Deutsche Umwelthilfe, the environmental NGO, has spoken out against at length, especially in the past few weeks. So this is something where we see upstream in the Russian Federation, European Space Agency satellites seeing methane plumes from the upstream and the midstream pipelines that feed projects like Nord Stream 1 and 2. So this is really not about climate change, addressing climate change in that respect.
Benjamin Schmidt, unfortunately, we're out of time. Always good to talk with you. And I think this story will have some longer legs on it than we thought originally. Come back and talk with us again. Good seeing you.
Sounds good. Anytime. Thanks so much, Brent.
Well, the day's almost done. The conversation continues online. And remember, no matter what happens between now and then, tomorrow is another day. We'll see you then, everybody.